The Lord of Darkness by Shelby Cody Sweeney. Part 1, The End of the World. Chapter 7, Uxor. I'd like to give you a little context before describing the next part. Until recently, Nick and Michael were best friends and practically inseparable. To illustrate their friendship, I'll tell you about a typical evening for them during the time of Uxor, the world we all worked on just before Earth. Having finished work for the day, Nick teleported directly to Michael's room in heaven and let himself in. The room featured many glorious bodies of water, including a roiling ocean, a placid lake, roaring waterfalls, trickling springs, and assorted types of rainfall. The fountains that rose from the landscape were exquisite. One waterfall was designed so beautifully it has made prominent artists weep. The fountain of a giant bursting from the ground was so realistic that more than one person jumped back with alarm when they first saw it. Per usual, Nick sauntered past all that artistry and straight to the giant whirlpool nestled behind a large rock feature. He dropped a few leaves in and watched them swirl around and around until they reached the center and were sucked down beneath the surface. Then the whirlpool self-cleaned by atomizing the leaves, filtering out the excess chemicals for use elsewhere. Michael appeared beside him in a flash of light. "You always stare at it like it'll be different this time." Nick grinned and shrugged. "I like watching it happen. Why else do you have a whirlpool?" "Fair point," Michael conceded, watching with more interest as another of Nick's leaves was tossed in and swept up by the current. "Ever feel like there ought to be more to life?" asked Nick, still staring at the swirling water. "More than literally everything," the other seraph replied. "Not really, no." Nick frowned. "Good point." Shaking his head, he smiled. "Sorry, just feeling bored and restless, I guess." "Been happening to you a lot lately," Michael noticed. Nick sighed dramatically. "That's the trouble with being so efficient at work." Bobons, the denizens of Uxor, were so even-tempered and easy to work with that his staff moved them through hell like clockwork, without him needing to lift a finger. Bobons were adorable brown, furry quadrupeds with elephantine trunks and ursine bodies. They were intelligent and compassionate, inventing both computers and therapists earlier than average. "Ready?" asked Michael, jogging Nick out of his thoughts. "Always," Nick replied, drawing his sword. Michael regularly trained for combat with the other Archangels of Security, but he also further developed his skills by practicing with his best friend. Nick lashed wildly at Michael with his sword, and the latter expertly deflected the blows. Each round ended when Michael managed to restrain him. After their fifth round, Michael commented, "You're sluggish today." "Or you got faster," Nick reasoned. Nick sheathed his sword and stood facing Michael in the ready position. It was the setup for an exercise they'd practiced many, many times before. Archangel Michael of Security sighed. "Again? How long do we need to keep doing this one?" Nick smirked. "Till you beat me at least once. Now quit stalling and come at me." Michael ran at him, attempting to thrust his sword into Nick's chest. Nick deftly stepped to the side, knocked Michael off balance, and pulled him into a headlock. Then he released him, and they repeated the exercise several more times. Each time, Nick won in a seemingly different way, thanks to a mysterious trick he'd learned from another Archangel of Security millions of years prior. "Enough," Michael decided frustratedly. "This'll never happen in real combat." "I sure hope not, or you're screwed," Nick replied, eyes twinkling with amusement. "One day I'll figure out how you do that," Michael vowed for the umpteenth time. Nick chuckled. "No, you won't. Ready for the Bobon?" Michael needed to practice defending against a celestial Bobon attack in case it ever came up. Nick transformed into a burly female Bobon, since they were 30% larger than the males on average. Even so, the tallest ones only came up to Michael's waist when standing normally, and his shoulders when reared up on their hind legs. Nick charged at Michael, who easily dodged. They ran through a series of Bobon versus Seraph combat scenarios for the next hour, at which point they were thoroughly exhausted. Nick changed back into his usual form, and the pair laid beside each other on the ground, breathing heavily. "That sideswipe with your trunk's new. You nearly had me there," Michael said. "I got a few tips from Boreal," Nick admitted. Boreal was an Archangel of Security assigned to a world whose name is impossible to translate into any human language, as it comprises primarily of sounds inaudible to the human ear. He was also the one who taught Nick how to invariably escape Michael's frontal assaults. Michael and Nick both knew that Bobons didn't pose much of a physical threat to Seraphim, so they really didn't need the amount of training they put into it. The truth was, they were happy for an excuse to shut everyone else out for a few hours a day and just be themselves. "What'll we do now?" asked Michael. "Want to help me get the lighting right in my latest forest?" Nick suggested. "Sure." While Michael's favorite activities tended towards the athletic, Nick's tended towards the artistic. Trees best. His room in heaven was heavily wooded, with forests spanning a wide variety of climates. Many were replicas of some of his favorite forests from various worlds he'd worked on over the eons, but most of them were products of Nick's overzealous imagination. One forest was full of stick-thin trees that grew so tall their tops were obscured by clouds. Another was full of black-barked trees with silver, hollow pine-like needles that chimed sweetly in the wind. It was permanently in darkness, save for the light of 2 glorious moons that sparkled on the trees like snow. Yet another forest had trees that grew in unusual shapes. Some looked like animals, others formed abstract meanderings, and some joined together to form buildings and furniture. Given enough practice, you can configure a room to automatically adjust itself based on your mood. Most Celestials use this feature for things like creating a cozy fire when they feel snugly, or a beautiful landscape when they feel like flying. Nick configured his to adjust the weather and lighting to best analogize his mood. Occasionally storms would tear across the skies, but generally the weather was pleasant. Nick led Michael to a forest where the trees were still just saplings. A binary sunrise bathed a young forest in a rainbow light. "I can't get the angle right," Nick explained. "I don't want the suns in my eyes, but I want the shadows longer and more defined." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "Have you tried manually changing the shadows instead of relying on the suns?" "Don't you think that's cheating?" Nick asked. Michael blinked at him. "I don't even know how to begin responding to that." "Okay, I'll give it a shot," Nick decided. He crouched by the nearest sapling and stretched his shadow further along the ground. After repeating the task a few more times, Nick loudly asked, "You gonna keep standing there, or are you gonna help?" "Sure, sorry," Michael replied, grabbing a shadow and stretching it out like Nick had. "Just a little stunned you're doing it one at a time." "All at once is no fun," Nick asserted. "There's no way that's true," chuckled Michael. After a few minutes, he asked, "Want to hit the bars after this?" "No thanks," Nick replied. "After last night, I'm going to swear off women and alcohol for a bit." Michael was stunned. "You're kidding." Nick shook his head. "I'm serious. I won't go near the stuff for the next 3 hours, 4 tops." Michael laughed. "You almost had me going." "I totally had you going," Nick contended. So much has happened since then.